An Eric Clapton full SG. All right, we're talking about Eric Clapton's SG.
Yeah, the fool. You'd have to be a fool to buy the fool, I guess.
All right, Jonathan here.
And Sean.
At Casino Guitars.
It's us.
Before we go any farther, because this is going to get heated, I know, today. Hit like, hit subscribe.
Hit the bell.
Hit the bell. All right, it's out of the way. So we're talking about Eric Clapton's SG, the fool with all the paint, you know, from the really cool video where he's like showing how to get the woman tone and kicking on the wah and all that stuff.
That's right.
So it's sold at auction recently for $1.27 million.
$1.27 million.
Which is a lot, you know.
But it's not really that much compared to what we've seen other stuff go for.
Especially for a guitar that I think, you know, a lot of people always talk about, the cream years, and that was the best Clapton, and that was the best tone. And
well, and just iconic in what it's like, it's Clapton's version of the Monterey Strat, right? It's Clapton's version of, you know, his number one, in a way, right?
Sort of.
Sort of.
I think the fact that that's convoluted, we'll get into it. I think the fact that that's a convoluted answer is part of the problem, right? But we've got a list of some of the most expensive guitars that have ever sold pulled up. So... Yes. While we're arguing about whether or not Clapton is worth a damn, because Sean has bad opinions.
Bad opinions.
Bad opinions.
Right opinions.
We'll go through the list and we'll talk about it.
Yes.
So let's do it.
So, I got my hot take, and I've been saving it to say to Johnny Rob here, and know that I love you before we get into this. This is gonna be a riff in our relationship, though. Something I've been good at in the shop lately.
I'm ready. I'm ready. I can take it.
I think I got two thoughts on this, right? I think while Eric Clapton is super influential, I don't think he is as influential today as he may have been 40 years ago. 40 years ago, as he was so influential in that moment in time, but outside of that bubble, I think he started to slip away. And talking like in the 80s onward, it started to slip, especially once we get to the mid to late 90s. I feel like a lot of, you know, people my age, or at least within my generation, I see Eric Clapton as the guy wearing a bowling shirt at a festival, playing some kind of goofy looking Strat usually.
I get that.
There's not as much of like the, you know, and to take it back to a lot of the guys from that same era, the guys who, you know, live on in like a legacy of, you know, like Jimi Hendrix, 27, he is the legend, right? It's like, boom, he had all that. There's a lot of those guys who had that, you know. Now, I feel like there's that on one end, and then I think the other end of this is that he changed guitars so often. There never seemed to really be just one guitar, because there's the Blackie, there's the Brownie, there's the 335, there's the SG, there's the, you know, it just seems like there's a continuous
that's
flow
true.
of guitar.
I mean, once he settled on the Strat, I feel like that became synonymous with him as like a Strat, but it was never, you know, once we get past like Blackie and Brownie, there's no, it's like he's always getting a new shiny Strat, it looks like. Yeah. So I get that. Although I can remember the iconic sort of pictures of him with the lace sensor, Eric Clapton, like the pewter models, you know, and
that's what I say. That's
that's in that. Well, now here's I understand the point about him becoming less influential. Here's the thing about it for me, and probably just my age, right? Like in a lot of ways, I think Clapton was the bridge to the original stuff. He was how you found out about all the cool like old blues guys like Robert Johnson or B.B. King or Buddy Guy. You know, like he did that for a lot of people. Yeah. And then I think he grew into like the sort of elder statesman who, hey, he is the weird guy with the bowling shirt who's playing, you know, but he puts on the festival. Yeah. He gets everyone together. He's the guy who calls and says, hey, young guy, I like your guitar playing. Do you want to come play at Crossroads?
He's the one carrying it onward. And I see
you know what I mean? Yeah. But I understand that doesn't necessarily, but I think this is, I'm going to go out there a little bit.
Get in there, baby.
That's part of the issue with our society and our culture right now is that we're like, screw that guy, F him, you know, I think his playing's boring, and then no one cares, when really I think he deserves a lot more credit.
I do agree with that statement. I think the reasons why Eric Clapton has kind of reached this place of, you know, a lot of people saying that he is irrelevant, A lot of those reasons I don't agree with.
Yeah.
Some of them I do, some of them I don't, though. The majority of the ones in recent memory, I'm kind of like, that shouldn't be enough to sink a man's legacy. You know what I mean?
I just think it's cool right now to be like, I hate boomers and boomers are dumb. And, I always argue anybody who says his playing is like boring or whatever, they just haven't heard the right things and they haven't seen some of the live stuff.
Yeah.
We talked about that, but
well, and to kind of redeem myself on some of the Clapton end too. There's a lot of things that we've talked about on the live end. I heard the Little Wing live version that he did from like the 60s, 70s era.
It's killer,
and it's amazing. It really is, and it's phenomenal playing, and it really made me rethink some of my thoughts on Clapton. But nonetheless, I do think it's something about him and at least his guitars, they don't seem to pull as much. And that's where we'll kind of like start on this list where we have the Blackie. Now, granted, this is in 2004. We talked about this before we started the video. It's 20 years ago, right?
It's a while ago, and to be fair, when it was sold, it set a world record. Thank you, Derek, for that cue on the TV in the back so that I know these things.
That's right.
But yeah, so it sold for $959,000.
Yes.
So
almost a million. Yep.
Nothing. Now, also about Blackie, right? Well, I mean, obviously that was a ton back then. So,
yep.
Also a guitar built from parts out of a barrel.
Yeah.
but still super cool. All right, so that's number 14.
Yes.
On this random list. Bob Dylan's 1964 Fender Stratocaster.
That's right. It went for $965,000, which still close to $1 million, not $1 million. This was in 2013. I remember when this one sold at the time, and I still am a huge Bob Dylan fan. I remember this, becoming that new record.
Well, but I mean, that is an epic moment in history. Bob Dylan goes electric.
Yes.
Like it should be like to sort of commemorate that. I get why some rich collector.
A piece of history directly to a show. Now, maybe is that more of a thing too with Clapton? Because is it that none of these guitars were really tied to one major event?
I think so. I think that is part of it.
Like our next, well, not this one exactly, but I was going to say the Kurt Cobain Martin, which is probably at number one, jumping ahead a bit, is it's iconic for being in the live in New York. There's moments that these guitars are kind of tied to. David Gilmour's Martin D35.
Everyone knows David Gilmore for his Martin. Well, but now this was sold in 2019, right? So
yes.
Like I imagine if you adjust for inflation,
it probably would be in the 8 to 9 area.
So Blackie probably honestly
still sold for more. Yeah.
But I mean, you hear this on Dark Side of the Moon. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Wish You Were Here as well.
That's pretty cool.
Big songs. Dwayne Almond's 57 Gibson Les Paul.
Sold for $1.25
in 2019 as well.
In 2019.
Which still kind of puts, in my mind, once again, for inflation, and, also this is before a housing crisis, too. I was like, wow.
Well, I think 2019, I kind of think that's low for this guitar. I mean, like, Dwayne Almond is so many people's, like, mountaintop. Do you know what I mean? And, well, maybe it's Clapton's fault because he did play this on Layla.
I was going to say, he played it on Layla, and that's kind of funny.
This is a total aside here, but I saw a thing the other day, and it made me really love Clapton even more. It was Warren Haynes was talking about he and Derek Trucks had that guitar out, right?
Yep.
And they said, "Oh, we should go show this to Eric," because Clapton was at whatever show they were playing.
Yep.
And I just read this on like guitar.com or something. They walk it in, and they say Clapton freezes and said, "Oh God, is that a replica of Dwayne's guitar?" And they said, "No, it is. This is Dwayne's guitar." And they said he just stopped, and you could tell how much he loved and sort of missed Dwayne, and took the guitar and just was like, man. And then, but it was it was an open E, so then I guess Trucks plays it for the show that night. But they said that he recognized it. I mean, like, that's kind of crazy.
That's really cool, and I just had the funniest thought of, like, he went to play it as an opening. He was like, ugh!
Damn you, Dwayne!
Exactly. He's like, whatever, take it, kid.
Take it, Derek. No. I never want to see it again.
I'm sure that didn't happen, but that's just a really funny thought. I mean, that is, I just think that's a pleasant memory, yeah.
Okay, so the Fool is actually number 10 on this list. 2023, 1.27, so $1,270,000. So now it's owned by Jim Irsay.
Which, like most of these guitars, kind of are.
This is probably the top.
Irsay's like, yeah, you can have anything.
But I mean, obviously that is a lot for a guitar.
It is.
I can see the comments now. You elitist fools! I can't believe you. I mean, it is, but
it's a lot for a guitar. But I think as we go down this list and we see the numbers go up, and I think there is something to the fact of, you know, and it's morbid to say, but if the person has passed away.
That
and
helps.
Especially if they were in that 27 Club thing, Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, stuff like that, which is, in its own way, it's a little, like for me personally, I think it's a little sick and twisted anyways to do that stuff and be like, yeah, well, it's worth more now because, you know, he never played guitar. I'm like, yeah, sure, but it's still weird. I don't know.
I mean, that's just going to drive me.
I know. It's just a weird thing.
They're not making any more. He's not playing any more guitars. I mean, that's why it is morbid, but I kind of get it.
I get it too. It's
I just hate, like, to me, the whole Cream, I don't know. That maybe, and again, it's all personal, right? Because that was so huge for me learning to play guitar and getting into guitar.
Yeah.
And you never really had like a Cream where you're like, oh wow, I love Cream.
For me, it was never Clapton. It was always Jimi Hendrix and honestly, like a Kurt Cobain, to be honest. Like, those were my two biggest influences from a young age. I listened to Jimi Hendrix and Kurt Cobain in middle school heavily. Both of those artists, huge.
It was probably the Cream stuff that got me into Hendrix. So, you know, and I think that at one point that was probably true for lots of folks. But anyway, so number 9, Kurt Cobain's 1993 Fender Mustang, a true classic.
The Sky Sting, baby. He played this in at the live show, didn't it?
I'm just saying, if it was any other of these guitars, you'd be like, oh my god. $1,587,500. Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of cool that it was in all, you know, he played it a lot of the time.
Well, now, and sorry to interrupt
go ahead,
you.
You're good.
My thing here with this too, right? The Kurt Cobain especially. That guitar, scroll back up real quick, sorry, is, I want to say this was a production model guitar of the year, right? Like, I don't know if this was a vintage guitar.
He says it was one of 10 ordered by Cobain.
So,
but built in Japan.
What does it add to the conversation that this is a Japanese-made guitar, to where the Clapton guitars that we're speaking of were made in a golden era of guitar building, right? Like this sacred 50s, 60s thing. There's something there to the specs of those guitars. Like, we know how much, everybody knows how much the vintage instruments sell for right now. Yeah. This guitar was made in a time where I could go and buy a guitar made in Japan in the 90s right now for probably less than $1,000, you know?
You'd maybe be surprised. But, I mean...
and probably would be.
What's funny about this one, right, is I'm reading this. Derek's got a little thing pulled up so we can see this. It's like magic. It's like we're a real YouTube channel now. But it says it was one of 10 ordered, and they only did it in Japan because the custom shop would not make left-handed instruments at the time, which I just find really funny.
Kind of bizarre. That's wild.
It's like, well, it's this kid. They're like, screw him.
Biggest artist in the world right now.
Clapton's going on tour. But yeah.
Well, here we go.
Number 8, Gilmore's 54 Fender Stratocaster was just over 1.8 million. So I mean, and that was in 2019 as well.
And it's serial number 0001. Number 1. So this is, in a lot of ways, the first Stratocaster.
One of
It's
very confusing.
It is very confusing. But you know what I mean. One of the first. Like, you know.
Yeah.
Spec 1. Boom, you know. So. Which is pretty nuts.
Pretty cool.
I dig it.
Number 7, Jerry Garcia jumping in there.
The Wolf.
The Wolf, 1.9 million. I get this. I mean, Grateful Dead has such a huge following, and this is obviously, it is an iconic guitar to him.
And this took the place of so many, you know, instruments that came before it, you know, that seemed to, this one was the one that carried on, you know, which is kind of cool.
It is kind of fun, like a lot of these guitars also. Like that one benefited a charity, it said, which I think is kind of fun.
I think that is the right reason.
If you're going to sell a guitar for this kind of insane price and somebody's going to buy it.
That's right.
Now, here is John Lennon's Gibson J160E with the little knobs in the front. Obviously, that was kind of neat. Went for $2.4 million. So $2,410,000. I mean, I think anything with the Beatles.
I mean, yeah. Which is kind of funny. There's so many people I think about, like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, stuff like that, how much their stuff isn't on, you know, these kind of things. And maybe it's just because they're not sold yet or they haven't sold, but it's just always odd to me.
This one's kind of cool. Never owned by anybody famous. This was the Reach Out to Asia Fender Stratocaster, and it was auctioned for victims of the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. And it's just a Mexican standard Strat But it's got, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Eric
Yeah.
Clapton, Brian May, Jeff Beck, everybody's signature. But it's kind of, again, like that's the right, if you're going to spend,
the right things,
millions of dollars on something, that's a cool one. Eddie Van Halen's Hot for Teacher Kramer's number 4. Sold for almost $4 million.
That's
$3,900,000 and some change.
Man, I totally missed this. This was this year. And I didn't.
I remember hearing about this, but
it's wild.
I mean, that was kind of like perfect timing, right? Like Eddie hasn't been too long since he's passed. Everybody's sort of in the midst of Eddie love right now, which rightfully so. I'm not saying that's not deserved at all. I'm just saying, again, morbid, but
yes,
it is kind of
when
right
something
time.
else too that I kind of think about is if, once again, morbid, dark, Eric Clapton were to die, would all these guitars double, triple, quadruple in the value that they sold for because of the influence thing like we've talked about?
I think they will. I think because, like, history, I think, will look back relatively fondly on Clapton in 10 years, 15 years. So, I think so. Once he passes away. It is a little sad to me that, in Eddie's case, that his son doesn't own some of those guitars.
I think
like
about that as well, I like to think that he owns the OG Frankie, which I believe he does.
I think he does have some. It would be cool, if he, I don't know, whatever. Now, the black Fender Stratocaster that belonged to Mr. David Gilmore, it went for $3,975,000 in 2019. I remember that was a big deal when it sold.
I remember that too.
But again, I mean, like he. There's not many guitar players that I think elicit as much emotion in like their crazy like rabid fandom as David Gilmour.
Well, and in a way too, this is another weird scenario talking about the influence over time.
Sounds like I hate David Gilmour.
No, I love David Gilmour. David Gilmour's the man.
But see, you can't even say that. You can say I hate Clapton, and people are like, yeah, I get it. He sucked. But you can't say, cannot say.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, so we don't know who's walking around amongst us that actually hates David Gilmour because they can't say it.
I love David Gilmour. I don't know what he's talking about. He's off on a tangent.
I'm just kidding.
I swear,
man, seriously,
I love him. I'm not drinking Kool-Aid. No.
You can't say you hate David Gilmour.
But his influence, in the same way that I talked about like the reputation of Clapton over the years, right? Mm-hmm. Somehow, I feel like David Gilmour's reputation has gone the opposite direction, where I feel like it's gained more momentum in a weird way.
People seem to appreciate it more and more.
It seems like that has become more and more of a stronghold, and who's to say why? Like, it's hard to really pull out all the, like, what do you think?
Clapton stuff is so blues based, and a lot of it now people say, oh, it sounds like a cliche or a trope. And now people forget that like it's because he started those things. But nevertheless, like it's not too often that you go to like a recording session nowadays and they're like, well, play something really, like super bluesy. Like play a lot, play really bluesy. But they might say play atmospheric and melodic and make it sing. Well, what did David Gilmour do? He did that thing. And I think that's just where we are in music right now. That's where the guitar is right now.
Yeah, that's actually a great point to bring up. I think that's a great,
I think that's why right now.
On it, yeah.
And you hear his influence in those things and you hear it in music.
Yep.
Number 2, Kurt Cobain, Smells Like Teen Spirit, Fender Mustang. $4,550,000.
What I love in there is they said that they had estimated it only to go for $800,000.
That seems really low to me.
It does.
And it's funny how much Kurt Cobain's on this list of these top. We started at 14, and he's also number one.
Number one,
because his D18 just sold for $6 million and a little over $6 million, which is crazy. But it's the MT. That is iconic. Again, and you said this, maybe the Clapton, the SG, like none of his guitars are really like a moment for a lot of people.
Yeah, and
this one is.
To where, we can look at the David Gilmour ones too. They seem to be tied to moments or at least songs, With Clapton, I feel like it may have been there's just not as much tied to one guitar and an album or a song or any of that. And I know that The Fool was a part of the Derek and the Dominoes Layla record, correct? Am I right in that, or is it Cream
I think it's Cream.
Okay.
It's more Cream. I don't know if it was still around. I don't know if he still owned it by then.
But see, that's like what was used on that record. You know what I mean? And
you got some stuff like that guitar that he used for Slide, the Hardtail Strat that they auctioned for Clapton. It didn't even sell. You know what I mean? So I don't know that people care about that as much, right? Like oh, he used it for this song on the Derek and the Dominoes record.
Yeah.
And you know how much I love, if you've watched much of the channel, you know that I love that record, and I love Derek and the Dominoes. And I don't think that gets as much love, like right now, for some reason, just in general.
You know what'd be interesting to see as well is take somebody comparable like Jimmy Page.
Yep.
I would love to see some of Jimmy Page's guitars and where they would sit, you know, if we were able to see in comparison. Because there's a little bit of like a troubled history at moments. There's those kinds of things. There's a lot of parallels with that stuff, and it would be really, really interesting to see how they line up.
Well, I think like with Clapton, right? Like he sold a lot of these guitars for auction for the Crossroads thing, and he's obviously still alive. He's still playing, but he's not playing those guitars. Yeah. He's playing like newer production or custom shop guitars most of the time, right?
Push it.
Jimmy Page, you know what his number 1 and number 2 are, and he owns them and he still plays them. So when he dies, like that's a bigger deal.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter if you like Jimmy Page or Clapton more. Like, it just, I think objectively, those are tied to him and they're friggin' bursts. So I mean.
Maybe, well, I mean, I think there's a lot to that where Clapton continued to evolve and try and push himself forward in some form or fashion. Maybe that's a, part of it.
Clapton seems a little bit more like the guitar's a tool. Yeah. It's never like this particular guitar.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You see him at Crossroads and he's got some zany paint job on it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Or so maybe that's part of it too. But,
well, 30 or 40 years from now, we can have this conversation on John Mayer probably and look at, what the weird, you know what I mean? Because he's got his black Strat. Okay, right. Well, if we go to the Roxy Pink Silver Sky, is that going to hold a value because this is the one that,
but
he played in the music videos?
He plays a bunch of them interchangeably. You know what I mean? And then, like, how would you ever know? How would you prove it? Does it matter? And then, like, are his vintage Strats he owns now, like, I don't feel like they're tied to him as much. Like, is anybody gonna? I feel like he's gonna be way more like Clapton than Gilmore or Jimmy Page.
I kind of agree. I
for as much as people love John Mayer,
yep.
And we'll see what happens. But
I do think though that is how that's going to go down, and it's kind of wild to think that that is dependent upon if you care about
You heard it here. Stuff. John Mayer's the new Clapton. Sean said. Yes. Sob rock.
Journeyman.
Anything else?
I don't think so. I think we did all right. Are we still friends?
We're still friends. I knew you had these bad opinions going in. I still loved you. So there you go. Let us know what you think in the comments. Yeah. Should that guitar have gone for more? Should it have gone for less? Does anyone care at all? Yeah. Thanks for watching. Have a great Thanksgiving. We shall see you next time. Don't forget to go check out our video with our friend Ohm. And if you can, please donate to his the GoFundMe for him to help replace some of the stuff that was lost in the fire in Maui.
Give him a follow on Instagram as well.
Yep. Guitars on the Beach. Yep.
He's been posting a lot of videos and stuff like that. He did a live stream the other day.
Our buddy sent it to me, and I haven't watched it yet, but I missed it.
I watched it and got in there and talked to him a little bit. So
cool.
Check him out. Seriously, go follow him.
Yep.
There you go.
Thank you guys. See you later.